We're with Richard Morgan today, who is the Chief Commercial Officer for UK and Ireland for Danka. Richard, we're obviously going through an amazing time in the retail perspective at the moment. How are things shaping up on a logistics perspective for yourself with your customers, both in the UK and internationally?
Well, I think if we talk about retail specifically, I think that there are three primary challenges that face us today. Firstly, there's the traditional non-food sector, which is one that we operate in quite heavily for a great many of the major retailers. Indeed, I think some 12 or 13 of the top 20 retailers in the UK by import volume.
And is that remaining fairly stable, or are you seeing a decline?
Well, I have to say the volumes can be up and down. It really depends on time of year and launches. Retailers are being very, very cagey around inventory, which I think is absolutely to be expected. That has bounced back a little bit actually, so we're going to have a pretty good 2011 versus our original expectation. But the point is that if we look across the three sectors, and I would define those three sectors as major retail non-food, who want more and more and more and more value. They absolutely want to drive cost out of supply chain. Then there's the mid-size retailer, if I may call them that, who are now beginning to wish for solutions that are almost as sophisticated as the major guys, and we're bringing that to market with our new mid-size retail product. But we're doing that in a way that doesn't require a great deal of IT integration, so that we've got ease of access for them into those kinds of systems and visibility and supply chain development. And then there's the fresh produce guys. And fresh produce is going through an absolute revolution at the moment. Maybe
in what respect?
Maybe actually, to be fair, it might be more accurate to call it an evolution now that I come to think about it, because the reality is that retailers, the larger ones particularly, will look at the fresh produce side of their business and realise that they want to have the same level of control over their cold chain, as we'll call it in this case, that they do on their non-food. And they want to be able to influence that. They want to be able to influence the cost. They want to be able to influence when product arrives. They want to flow product and inventory into their systems as efficiently as possible. And they also want to do that with the maximum amount of visibility. They want to do that with a logistics partner who has infrastructure on the ground in country to deliver the service to them. And the reality is that they've now stepped onto that road. They're going down that path. I think it's inevitable that will continue to grow. And
so what has happened previously? That there's been a supplier who's had the relationship with yourself rather than a retailer.
Well, I think though that's correct, and those relationships still exist. Like I said, it's an evolution. I don't think in 6 months from now the entire business will be revolutionised. There is still a role for the importer. And I think that those importers are being put under pressure to drive more and more value, which is the reason why they want to work with companies like ours. Because fundamentally what you're trying to do for the retail market is two things. You're trying to give them the absolute best price on the shelf possible, because obviously that's what's driving their margins. And secondly, you're trying to bring a level of predictability that's very hard to do with what is fundamentally an unpredictable product. Because crops fail, things change, weather patterns change, so on and so forth. So where you used to buy a product in one location for reasons of local crop conditions, you may have to source it somewhere else. Now, previously the importers they tackled all of those issues for retailers. But now as retailers want to do it themselves, they're going to have to find a way to be able to bring that agility. And supply chain and logistics is probably the last thing they really want to be thinking about. So they want to partner with an organisation where if they change from Chile to South Africa, they know that the level of service will be consistent in both locations.
But do you think this is potentially cyclical, that we've seen over the last 10-15 years the retailers go through various other changes where they try to drive costs out of the supply chain? Some have worked, some haven't. Do you think this current regime by some of the retailers to go direct is a fad, or is it here for? Is it evolution?
No, I think it is evolution. I don't think it's a fad. Certainly, it isn't that. How quickly it will move along, what kind of pace it's got to it, I think is open to debate, because it's not an easy thing to do. And I think that most of the retailers have looked at it, and when you make a presentation to the board and you say, well, look, we can add 10% to our margin on the following products if we source them directly, it becomes a bit of a no-brainer. But the reality is, the practical reality on the ground of actually making that happen without having the expertise available to you in terms of how you're going to get the product from one location to the other most efficiently, That's very, very difficult to do.
Yeah, okay.
So I think that's the reason why, as retailers have put their toe in the water, they've got some pace,
yeah.
but they're also being relatively cautious to make sure the infrastructure exists before they hit the button.
Okay, but also, not all of the retailers have currently adopted this new scheme.
No,
so if we were sat here in 5 years' time, what would your predictions be?
I think, well, for the moment, we're still talking about the major 3 or 4 grocery retailers who are looking at this with any degree of action and detail. So in 5 years from now, I think there will still be a role for importers of that, there's no question, particularly I think in specialised product and so on. But I think 5 years from now, it's clear that for the mainstay of product, tinned or bananas or whatever it might be, I think for big swathes of that business, the retailers will have infrastructures in place to buy that product directly from the grower.
Right.
Now, how quickly we get there is simply a matter of the appetite to make it happen and the ability of companies like ours to be able to support it.
Presumably, Richard, you're perfectly placed because the retailers need to move this product from A to B, and they're going to have to adopt people like yourself to do that for them, because there isn't a likelihood that they would take on their own shipping line, is there?
Well, I mean, I think shipping line or not, actually the reality is that the shipping line is only part of the problem. Right. You need to have the trucking infrastructure at origin, you need to be able to process export documentation. You need to be able to have container availability. Reefer containers can get quite scarce quite quickly. So you need to have container availability, the vessel capacity, landside operations here, customs clearance, trucking, and then in between all of that, you need to systemize that to bring the right level of visibility to the buyers and the inbound planners, so they know the product is on its way. So, you know, if it was easy, I think they'd be a little further down the way. I think they do realize that there's a challenge to it, and this particular vertical, if you want to call it that, fresh produce, is a global priority for us. We are ideally positioned to maximise our position in that market. We have the biggest reefer logistics product available in the UK, and frankly speaking, the growth we're seeing in that area is beyond our original expectations.
So can you offer an end-to-end solution from source right to supermarket shelf?
Yes. Well, I have to say that we're not going to be in the business of packing product. We're not going to be in the business of adding value in that way. I think there's still a niche market for that, and to be honest with you, organisations who don't operate in our world, who are very, very good at doing that, we wouldn't want to replicate that. What we're really doing is replicating what we do in the dry goods. So taking product directly from the person who grew it or manufactured it, taking it through to the distribution network of the retailer, who be that their own or one that they subcontract. And all points in between. That's the problem.
So the whole point of this appears to be that there's a lot of profitability that's held up within the supply chain. So if the retailers can adopt this particular route, utilising companies such as yourself, who's actually going to benefit from this? Is it going to be the consumer?
Well, I think ultimately one would like to think so, because if you look at the competitive nature, the top 3 or 4 grocers, I was in one only this weekend, and I saw a placard outside where they had their 3 primary competitors, and against the brand name of their competitors, they had a number of products in their store that were cheaper, right? So price, particularly in today's environment, clearly is a determining factor, right, for the majority of people when they grocery shop. So the reality is that these retailers, for these footfall products, mainstay products, bananas I think being a prime example, they will absolutely want to have the best product at the best price available consistently everywhere in their store network. That's what I think the objective is. If they can make some more money doing it, then all the better, nothing wrong with that at all. But I think fundamentally on these core products, they will want to be the first to market with the new wave of pricing.
Okay, and you mentioned earlier that that Danka and Maersk are investing very, very heavily in the likes of the ship element. Can you just go into a bit more detail on that? So,
well, I mean, Danko is a part of the AP Moller Group, and our sister company Maersk Line are making significant investments in container vessels and refrigerated container fleets and so on. We as Danko are making very significant investments in emerging markets, particularly if we talk about the fresh produce reefer product, particularly in Africa, North and South, and in Latin America, North America and Asia, where we have now built a network of subject matter experts who bring our product to market, operations experts, because fresh produce is a slightly different product, operations experts who manage our operations on the ground. And we've linked that network together now, and it brings this agility, I think, which is so important. It brings agility and consistency. So it's the agility for a customer to be able to switch from one market to another and know that we're on the ground there and we can deliver. And then deliver consistently. So you don't want to be thinking about, well, if I change my sourcing from Chile to Egypt, will my logistics provider be in a position to support me? You should be able to think, yes, with Danka, I know they will, albeit that there are always local market idiosyncrasies that, again, we help our customers overcome.
Okay. And then environmentally, there's a lot of consumers in the UK, mainland Europe, are not aware of the lengths that people like yourself and the growers actually go to grow this product. I presume with the development that you have coming online of better, more efficient boats, ships, that's on an environmental perspective, you're happy with the way that you're setting yourself, and that the carbon footprint of these products coming from South Africa, from North Africa back into the UK is going to be negligible in comparison to what we've seen in the past?
Well, firstly, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the carbon footprint created by moving these products around can be very substantial, particularly when product is flown, which obviously is the least effective manner of moving the product from an environmental perspective. I think that is ultimately driven by consumer need, because I think what any retailer will tell you is that their customers want access to seasonal product all year round, and that's fundamentally what's driving this. So they want to be able to get their hands on strawberries 11 months of the year rather than 2 or 3 months in the summertime when Wimbledon is on or whatever. So the reality is that in order to do that, product is being flown and shipped a great deal more than it used to be. But you're absolutely right. If you move it by ship and then minimize the trucking operation on either side, that is currently the most environmentally friendly, if I can call it friendly, manner. Surface truck transportation across Europe and air freight is very carbon heavy. You know, our sister companies are making investments in vessels that that burn less fuel, that will rotate through fewer ports, and will have a lower carbon footprint per container, and then refrigerated units that are doing the same thing, of course, and using less fuel and less power. And that will be the contribution. But I think ultimately, the more product you can move by sea, the less impact you ultimately have on the environment.
Okay. And Richard, finally, you're an international company. We work on an international basis within this sector of fresh produce. If there were potential customers that would be interested in having communication with Danka, what sort of ideal customer would you be looking for? Who could you give the best service to on an international perspective, who you may not already be dealing with?
Are you talking specifically about the fresh product?
Yeah.
I think that for me, we have 3 different types of customer for that particular product. I think firstly there are retailers who may want to begin to investigate how they can go about claiming the cold chain for themselves in order to do all the things we've just been talking about. Secondly, the importers who now realize that they also need to bring this service to market in order to create a compelling case to sell product into retailers so that they can add more value. And then the growers themselves who may wish to have an influence on how product is shipped and when and to whom and so on and so forth. So we operate right the way across the spectrum, and frankly speaking, wherever we can add value and wherever we can make a fundamental positive change to either a retail, an importer or grower supply chain, then we'd be happy to speak with them.
Okay, so on that basis you would be open to conversation with potential new customers, whether it be UK or international?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Richard Morgan, thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome.